Commander Thomas Reed's consciousness returned like a ship emerging from hyperspace, sudden, jarring, and with a momentary loss of orientation. His eyes snapped open to find himself lying on a metal examination table, surrounded by curved walls covered in pulsing bioluminescent circuitry. The air carried an unfamiliar sweetness, and his body felt wrong. "Neural transfer complete," announced a synthetic voice that seemed to echo inside his skull. "Host adaptation at 97% efficiency." Thomas tried to sit up, his movements feeling simultaneously foreign and familiar. His hands, no, not his hands, were calloused and stronger than he remembered. The memories came flooding back, the desperate battle above Earth's orbit, his ship breaking apart under enemy fire, and the experimental quantum transmission device activating as consciousness slipped away. "Location and status report," he managed, his voice raspier and deeper than before. "You are in Research Facility Omega, Celestial Empire of Andromeda. Your original body was lost in transit. Emergency protocols transferred your consciousness to a compatible host, a mining worker who suffered brain death in an accident. Time elapsed since transfer, 16 hours. Thomas processed this information with the calculated calm that had made him Earth's foremost military strategist. He was alive, billions of light years from home, in an alien body. Before he could question further, a distant explosion rocked the facility. "Alert," the AI announced. "Security breach in the Royal Quarter. Assassination attempt detected. Queen Nyra's life signs are elevated." Thomas was moving before conscious thought kicked in, muscle memory from both his original training and his new body's physical experience working in surprising harmony. He found a corridor and ran toward the sounds of energy weapons discharge, his tactical mind already analyzing the situation. The scene he encountered was chaos incarnate. In a vast chamber with crystalline pillars reaching toward a bioluminescent ceiling, a group of elegantly robed figures were taking cover from what appeared to be malfunctioning security drones. At their center stood a figure that commanded attention, tall, regal, with skin the color of twilight and eyes that gleamed like distant stars. Queen Nyra stood proud even in danger, wielding what appeared to be a ceremonial staff with surprising skill, but Thomas could see the tactical disadvantage immediately. The drone's targeting systems were adapting to the group's defensive patterns. "Your Majesty," he called out, already moving toward her position. "Those drones are using predictive targeting. You need to change your movement patterns." The Queen's head snapped toward him, her expression a mixture of outrage and disbelief. "How dare you address me directly, male? Guards, remove this." Another explosion cut off her words as a drone's energy blast nearly found its mark. Thomas didn't hesitate. He sprinted forward, his borrowed body's muscles responding with surprising agility, and tackled the Queen behind a fallen pillar just as energy fire scorched the air where she'd been standing. "Remove me after we survive," he suggested, already analyzing the drone's attack patterns. "Those ceremonial weapons your guards are using, they're quantum-locked energy focuses, aren't they? One good hit to a drone's primary processing core would cause a cascade failure." Nyra's eyes narrowed dangerously. "How does a mere laborer know of quantum-locked weaponry? Lucky guess. Can you make the shot or not, Your Majesty?" For a moment, he thought she might strike him. Instead, her perfect features settled into a mask of determination. "I never miss." "Prove it," Thomas challenged, then darted out from cover before she could respond. He moved in a deliberately erratic pattern, drawing the drone's fire while calculating trajectories in his head. "Whenever you're ready, Your Majesty." A lance of pure energy streaked past him with impossible precision, striking the lead drone exactly where he'd indicated. The machine froze, its shields flickering before it exploded in a shower of sparks. The remaining drones followed in quick succession as Nyra proved her claim about never missing. When the smoke cleared, Thomas found himself facing the Queen and a semicircle of guards with weapons trained on him. Naira studied him with an intensity that would have made lesser men flinch. "You are either exceptionally brave or monumentally foolish," she declared, her melodic voice carrying an edge of steel. "I get that a lot," Thomas replied, keeping his stance relaxed despite the weapons pointed at him. "Though usually right after saving someone's life." A murmur of shock ran through the assembled guards. No male had dared speak to the queen with such familiarity since she had assumed the throne and banished all men from positions of authority. The last one who tried had been exiled to the outer mining colonies. Naira raised one elegant hand, silencing her guards. "You move like a warrior, think like a tactician, and speak like a diplomat. Yet you wear the form of a common miner. Explain. Would you believe I read a lot?" "No." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "Which is why you will accompany me to my private chambers and explain exactly who you are. Consider it a reward for your timely intervention." Thomas recognized it for what it was, not a reward, but an interrogation. Yet he couldn't help but notice something beneath the queen's imperial demeanor, curiosity warring with her legendary disdain for men. "As you command, Your Majesty," he replied with a slight bow. "Though I usually prefer dinner before private audiences." Another shock ran through the assembled guards, but this time Thomas caught something else in Naira's expression, the briefest flicker of amusement before her features settled back into regal authority. "You presume much, minor." "Thomas," he corrected. "And presumption kept you alive today." As they walked through the palace corridors, Thomas noted how other males practically pressed themselves against the walls, eyes downcast in terror. Naira's reputation for harsh treatment of men was clearly well earned. Yet she had not punished his insolence, at least, not yet. He also noticed other details his military training wouldn't let him ignore: the palace's defensive layouts, the guard patrol patterns, and most importantly, the subtle signs that the drone attack had not been a simple malfunction. Someone had orchestrated this, and Thomas suspected he had just landed in the middle of something far more complex than a simple battle of the sexes. As they reached the queen's private chambers, Naira dismissed her guards with a gesture. Once alone, she turned to face him, her otherworldly beauty somehow even more striking in the private setting. "Now then, Thomas," she said, his name carrying an exotic lilt in her accent. "Let us discuss who you really are, and why I shouldn't have you executed for your presumption." Thomas met her gaze steadily. "I'd be happy to, Your Majesty. Right after you tell me who's trying to kill you, and why you're letting them get so close." For the first time, genuine surprise crossed Naira's perfect features. This, Thomas suspected, was going to be an interesting conversation. Queen Naira's private chambers reflected both opulence and tactical awareness, a fact that didn't escape Thomas's notice. The seemingly decorative crystalline formations doubled as defensive shields, and what appeared to be abstract light patterns on the walls were actually advanced security sensors. "Impressive," Thomas said, deliberately running his fingers along one of the crystals. "These formations aren't just for show. They're quantum-link defensive matrices, aren't they?" "Stop stalling," Naira commanded, though he caught the flicker of surprise in her starlit eyes. "You claim someone is trying to kill me. Explain." "Those weren't malfunctioning drones," Thomas replied, dropping the pretense of casual observation. "Their attack patterns were too coordinated, too precise. They were testing your defenses, mapping response times, identifying weaknesses. And how would a mere miner recognize such tactics? The same way I recognized quantum-locked weapons and defensive matrices." Thomas met her gaze steadily. "I'm not who you think I am. Clearly." Naira moved with liquid grace to a control panel, bringing up holographic displays of the attack. "Yet instead of having you executed for your deception, I find myself curious. Perhaps because you're the first male in decades to look me in the eye without flinching. Perhaps because I'm right about the assassination attempt?" Her lips curved slightly. "Perhaps both. Continue." Thomas studied the holographic replay, his tactical mind analyzing patterns. Look here, the drones attacked in waves, each targeting a different defensive weakness. This wasn't random malfunction. This was military precision. Which means a traitor within my ranks, Naira concluded, her voice hardening. Someone with access to military protocols. Someone who knows your prejudice against male advisors leaves blind spots in your security. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Choose your next words carefully, stranger. Why? Because I'm pointing out an uncomfortable truth? Thomas stepped closer to the displays, highlighting attack patterns. Your all-female command structure means predictable tactical responses. Your enemies know exactly how your forces will react because they've eliminated half of possible strategic variations. You dare? Yes, I dare. Thomas turned to face her directly. Because right now, your pride is going to get you killed. And somehow, I don't think that's how you want your reign to end. For a long moment, silence filled the chamber. Thomas could almost see the battle between fury and pragmatism playing out behind Naira's cosmic eyes. Finally, she spoke. If, and I stress if, I were to consider your analysis, what would you suggest? Let me help. Not as a subordinate, not as a male seeking power, but as someone who sees patterns you're trained to overlook. And why would you offer this? Thomas smiled slightly. Let's just say I have a vested interest in staying alive, and right now, your survival increases my chances significantly. Before Naira could respond, alarms blared throughout the palace. The holographic displays shifted, showing multiple breach points in the outer defenses. They're not waiting, Thomas observed, already analyzing the attack patterns. This isn't a test run, it's the real thing. Naira's hands flew over the control panels, directing defensive responses. But Thomas could see the attacks were perfectly coordinated to exploit traditional response patterns. Your Majesty, he said urgently, they know exactly how you'll react. You need to change tactics. I suppose you have suggestions? Despite her skeptical tone, she was already adjusting deployment patterns. They're expecting your forces to concentrate on obvious breach points. Split them instead. Use the maintenance tunnels your male workers know so well, the ones your female commanders probably ignore. Naira's eyes narrowed, but she gave the orders. Within moments, the attackers found themselves caught in crossfire from unexpected directions. Interesting, she murmured, watching enemy forces fall into disarray. You seem to know our systems remarkably well. I'm a quick study. Thomas highlighted another tactical display. But we have a bigger problem. These attacks are coordinated from somewhere inside the palace itself. Impossible. All command centers are staffed exclusively by females, yes. Which means one of your most trusted commanders is a traitor. Naira's expression hardened. If you're lying, test it yourself. Track the quantum signatures of the command protocols. They're coming from. Thomas's fingers flew over the controls, tracing energy patterns. There. The Western Command Center. High Commander Selena's station. Naira's voice was deadly quiet. My most trusted advisor. And the perfect position to exploit your blind spots. Thomas studied her face carefully. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Naira's response was interrupted by another explosion, closer this time. The palace shook, and emergency containment fields flickered. They're getting bolder, Thomas observed. Soon they'll make a direct attempt on your life, counting on your predictable protective protocols. Then we change the protocols. Naira's decision seemed to surprise even her. You have until this crisis ends to prove your worth, Thomas. After that, she left the threat hanging. Fair enough. He was already moving to the tactical displays. First, we need to set a trap, but it has to look like you're following standard procedures. Your predictability is finally going to work in our favor. As they began planning, Thomas noticed something else: the way Naira's commands carried more authority, her tactical decisions becoming sharper as she incorporated perspectives she'd previously dismissed. She was adapting, learning, growing stronger. And somewhere in the palace, her enemies were about to discover that the queen they thought they knew so well had become something far more dangerous, unpredictable. "Your battle coordination is remarkable," Naira commented as they finalized their strategy. "Almost as if you've had formal military training." "Maybe I have." Thomas met her gaze. "Maybe there's a lot about me you don't know yet." "Indeed." Her silver eyes studied him with new intensity. "I look forward to discovering just how many surprises you hold, Thomas. Assuming we survive the night." "Oh, we'll survive." He smiled grimly. "And your enemies are about to learn a valuable lesson about underestimating people based on gender, male or female." For the first time, Naira smiled back, a genuine expression that transformed her entire being from remote empress to something far more intriguing. "Perhaps I am as well." The Western Command Center erupted in chaos as Queen Naira strode in, her presence electrifying the air. Thomas followed 2 steps behind, noting how the female officers tried to hide their disgust at his presence, all except one. High Commander Selena merely raised an elegant eyebrow, her composure perfect. "My queen," Selena bowed, her silver uniform gleaming. "We've contained the security breaches, though I must protest the presence of a male during sensitive military operations." "Protest noted," Naira replied coolly. "And denied." Thomas stays. Thomas studied Selena carefully. If she was truly the traitor, she hid it masterfully. But there was something in her eyes when she looked at him, not just contempt for his gender, but calculation. "The attacks are following a pattern," Thomas said, moving to the central holographic display. "Each breach pushes our forces to specific defensive positions. Our forces," Selena emphasized the word, "are more than capable of handling these terrorists." "Are they?" Thomas manipulated the display, highlighting troop movements. "Because it looks like we're being herded. Each defensive position we take up leaves another sector vulnerable. Almost as if someone knew exactly how we'd respond." Selena's perfect features tightened slightly. "You dare question our tactical decisions?" "No," Naira interrupted, her voice sharp. "He questions mine. And he's right." She turned to face her assembled commanders. "We've become predictable. Our strength has become our weakness." A murmur ran through the command center. Thomas noticed several officers exchange glances. The conspiracy ran deeper than just Selena. "My queen," Selena stepped forward, "perhaps we should discuss this privately." The lights went out. In the sudden darkness, Thomas's combat instinct screamed. He dove forward, tackling Naira as energy weapons fire lit up the command center. They rolled behind a console as chaos erupted. "Right about now," Thomas grunted, "would be a good time to trust me completely." "Because you knew this was coming?" Naira's voice was deadly quiet. "Because I'm about to do something crazy to save your life." More weapons fire peppered their position. In the strobing light of energy blasts, Thomas could see palace guards engaging with corrupted security drones, and some of their own officers. "The maintenance tunnels," he said quickly. "The ones your male workers use. There's an access point 3 meters to our left." "How do you know that?" "Same way I knew Selena would make her move during a power failure." He risked a glance over the console. "She's not just trying to kill you, she's trying to discredit you. The queen who finally trusted a male advisor, only to die for her mistake." Naira's cosmic eyes studied him in the darkness. "And how do I know you're not part of her plan?" "Because I could have let you die a dozen times already." He met her gaze steadily. "And because right now, I'm your only chance at survival." Another explosion rocked the command center. Through the smoke, Thomas saw Selena directing troops with cold efficiency. "Your Majesty," he said softly, "I'm going to tell you something that will either make you trust me completely or have me executed on the spot. I'm listening. I'm not from your world. I'm not even from this star system. I'm a human military commander who was quantum transferred into this body during a battle light years from here." Naira was silent for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, she laughed, a genuine sound despite their dire situation. "That," she said, "explains far too much to be a lie." Her expression hardened. "The access panel. You're sure?" "Completely." She moved with liquid grace, pressing her hand against a seemingly solid wall. A panel slid open silently. "After you," she gestured. "Since you seem to know your way around my palace better than I do." They slipped into the maintenance tunnel just as another explosion rocked the command center. Thomas led them through the narrow passages, his borrowed body's muscle memory proving invaluable. "These tunnels run throughout the palace," he explained as they moved. "Your male workers use them to stay out of sight, to avoid offending the sensibilities of your female officers. And in doing so, created a perfect infiltration network." Naira's voice held a mix of admiration and irritation. "One my commanders never bothered to map." "Exactly. Selena's forces will expect you to use official evacuation routes. Instead," he stopped at an intersection, checking directions. "We're going to your private sanctum. How do you know about the quantum-linked defensive matrices?" He smiled slightly. "I told you, I'm a quick study. And right now, those matrices are our best chance at turning this around." They emerged into Naira's private chambers, where the crystalline formations still pulsed with energy. Thomas moved immediately to the control panels. "Your defensive systems are impressive," he said, fingers flying over the controls. "But you're only using them at half capacity. These crystals aren't just shields, they're weapons." "Impossible. They're purely defensive. Because that's what your female engineers designed them to be." Thomas's hands moved faster. "But the male craftsmen who grew these crystals? They knew their true potential. They just never dared tell you." The crystals began to pulse with new energy, their light shifting from blue to violet. "What are you doing?" "Saving your empire." He looked up at her. "If you'll let me." For a moment, Naira stood silent, her otherworldly beauty enhanced by the crystal light. Then she moved to stand beside him at the controls. "Show me," she commanded. As Thomas began explaining the true capabilities of her defensive systems, he noticed something had changed in Naira's demeanor. The imperial distance was gone, replaced by an intensity that made her even more striking. "You realize," she said as they worked, "that if we survive this, everything changes. Isn't that what you're afraid of?" She gave him a sharp look. "I fear nothing." "No," he agreed, watching her adapt to new tactical possibilities with remarkable speed. "But you've been hiding from change. And now change has found you anyway." Outside, they could hear the sounds of battle approaching. But in this chamber, surrounded by crystalline power they were about to unleash, Thomas saw something remarkable, a queen learning to trust, and in doing so, becoming even more powerful than before. The crystalline formations throughout Naira's chambers hummed with newfound power, their light casting shifting shadows across her face as she worked alongside Thomas at the control panel. Her fingers moved with increasing confidence over the controls, implementing modifications he suggested while adding refinements of her own. "Your engineers weren't entirely wrong about these matrices," Thomas observed, watching her work. "They are defensive. They just understood defense differently than you do." "Because they were female?" There was an edge to Naira's voice, but also curiosity. "Because they were trained to think in absolutes. Defense or attack. Male or female. But the universe rarely deals in absolutes. A distant explosion punctuated his words. The battle was drawing closer, but they could hear the confusion in the attackers' movements as they encountered unexpected resistance from the activated crystal network. Like you? Naira's cosmic eyes fixed on him. A human commander in a miner's body? Exactly. Thomas adjusted power flows through the crystal matrix. Things aren't always what they seem. Sometimes the best defense is understanding what others try to hide. Like the true purpose of these maintenance tunnels? She gestured at the hidden entrance they'd used. Or perhaps, like the real reason for this coup. Thomas looked up sharply. You've figured it out? Parts of it. Naira's expression hardened. Selena isn't just trying to seize power. She's trying to prevent something she thinks my policies will bring about. The integration of your society. Thomas nodded. She's not just against male advisors. She's against any change to the current power structure. Because change brings uncertainty. Naira's fingers flew over the controls with new purpose. And uncertainty threatens those who benefit from the current system. Another explosion rocked the palace, closer this time. But Thomas noticed something different in the way Naira handled the crisis, no longer the isolated queen maintaining imperial distance, but a leader actively engaging with the complexity of her situation. Speaking of uncertainty, he said, highlighting a tactical display, we have company coming. 3 squads, moving in formation through the main corridor. Selena's elite guard. Naira's lips curved in a predatory smile. She's finally coming herself. She has to. The longer this drags on, the more chance of. Thomas stopped abruptly, his tactical mind spotting a pattern. Wait. Something's wrong. What is it? These attack patterns, they're too obvious. Selena's smarter than this. He manipulated the displays, expanding the view. Unless what? Unless this isn't about killing you at all. His fingers flew over the controls. Computer, show me power distribution throughout the palace. The display shifted, revealing a complex network of energy flows. And there, deep in the substrata beneath them. There, Thomas pointed. That power surge. It's not battle damage. They're trying to access something. Naira leaned forward, her shoulder brushing his as she studied the display. The ancient archive. But that's impossible. It's been sealed for centuries. Which is exactly why Selena chose now to move. Thomas was already reconfiguring defensive systems. Think about it. Your society's rigid gender roles, the strict separation of duties, what if they weren't just about power? What if they were about keeping something contained? Understanding dawned in Naira's eyes. The archive contains technologies from before our empire's founding. Technologies that didn't care about gender? Thomas suggested. That might prove your entire social structure is based on artificial constraints? Before Naira could respond, the chamber's lights flickered. The crystal matrices pulsed erratically, their power fluctuating. They're tapping into the archive systems, Thomas announced, his hands dancing over controls. Using its power to override your defenses. Can you stop them? Not alone. He met her gaze. The crystals respond to both male and female energy signatures. That's why they were never working at full capacity before, they need both to achieve perfect harmony. Naira was silent for a moment, centuries of ingrained prejudice warring with tactical necessity. Then, with characteristic decisiveness, she moved closer. Show me. Together, they reached for the controls. The moment their hands touched, the crystals blazed with new intensity. Power flowed more smoothly, systems integrating in ways neither of them had anticipated. Remarkable, Naira breathed, watching the displays shift. All this time, we thought separation made us stronger. When really, it was just making you vulnerable. Thomas adjusted their defensive grid. Unity isn't about erasing differences. It's about understanding how they complement each other. The chamber door exploded inward. Through the smoke, High Commander Selena strode in, flanked by her elite guards. Her perfect features were twisted with contempt. How disappointing, she sneered. The great Queen Naira, corrupted by male influence after all. No, Selena. Naira's voice rang with authority. For the first time in centuries, I'm seeing clearly. She didn't move away from Thomas. The real corruption was believing that division made us strong. Pretty words, Selena raised her weapon. But they won't save you from. The crystal matrices pulsed, responding to Thomas and Naira's combined command. Energy fields sprang up, trapping Selena's forces in containment bubbles. Impossible, Selena gasped. The defensive systems can't. Can't what? Thomas asked mildly. Work together? Integrate male and female energy signatures? Evolve beyond artificial limitations? The same limitations you tried to maintain, Naira added, her voice cold. Even if it meant betraying everything our empire stands for. Through the chamber's windows, they could see the battle turning. The crystal network, now operating at full capacity, was systematically neutralizing the rebel forces. But Thomas's attention was on the power readings from below. The archive is still active. Whatever they started down there. Then we'll face it together. Naira's declaration held no hesitation now. After all, it seems the Ancient Ones knew something we forgot. True strength comes from unity, not division. As they prepared to descend into the archive's depths, Thomas caught Naira's glance. In her cosmic eyes, he saw something that transcended gender, species, and even the vast distance between their origins, recognition of a kindred spirit who understood that the greatest battles weren't fought with weapons, but with the courage to challenge one's deepest beliefs. The descent into the ancient archive felt like traveling backward through time. As Thomas and Naira moved through crystalline corridors that pulsed with otherworldly light, the very air seemed charged with forgotten power. Their footsteps echoed in perfect synchronization, a harmony that reflected their newfound partnership. These readings are off the scale, Thomas observed, studying a portable scanner. Whatever Selena's people activated down here, it's drawing power from the entire crystal network. Not just power. Naira's cosmic eyes tracked patterns in the ancient script flowing across the walls. Knowledge. The archive isn't just a storage facility, it's alive. They emerged onto a viewing platform overlooking a vast chamber. Below them, a massive crystalline structure pulsed with increasing intensity, its light casting rainbow refractions across the ancient machinery surrounding it. There. Thomas pointed to a group of figures working at a central control nexus. Selena's technicians. They're trying to access the core systems. But why? Naira's voice held genuine puzzlement. What could be so important that, she stopped abruptly, her perfect features showing rare shock. No. They wouldn't dare. What is it? The founding protocols. Her voice was barely a whisper. The original programming that shaped our society. Our beliefs about gender roles, about separation of powers. She turned to him, her eyes blazing. They're not just trying to protect the old way. They're trying to reinforce it. To rewrite the very fabric of our civilization. Thomas's tactical mind raced ahead. By strengthening the biological and psychological barriers between males and females. Making your people physically incapable of working together. Ensuring their power structure remains eternal. Naira's hands clenched. Everything I am, everything I believed, it was all artificially imposed. Not everything. Thomas touched her arm gently. Your strength, your leadership, those are yours. The prejudices were programmed. But you've already proven they can be overcome. The crystal core pulsed again, more violently. Energy arced between ancient machines as the technicians worked frantically. We have to stop them. Naira moved toward the platform's edge. But their position is too well defended. Even with our combined control of the crystal matrix. Then we don't fight them. Thomas was studying the energy flows with growing understanding. We show them a better way. Just like you showed me. What do you mean? The archive responds to both male and female energy signatures, remember? But not just individually. He met her gaze. Together, in harmony, we can tap into its full potential. Rewrite the protocols not to enforce separation, but to restore choice. Understanding dawned in Naira's cosmic eyes. Without hesitation, she moved to stand beside him at the platform's control interface. Like this? Her hands moved over the controls, adjusting power flows in patterns that complemented his own inputs. Exactly. The crystal matrix responded, its light shifting from violent pulses to a steady, harmonious glow. We're not erasing the differences between your people. We're showing them how those differences can work together. Below them, the technicians noticed the change. Their frantic work became desperate as the core's energy began to shift, responding to the new patterns Thomas and Naira were creating. It's working, Naira breathed, watching the ancient systems realign. But they're fighting back. The core's becoming unstable. Then we give it everything. Thomas took her hand, placing it on the main control crystal alongside his own. Trust in unity, remember? Their eyes met, and in that moment, all barriers fell away, queen and commander, alien and human, female and male. They were simply two beings working in perfect harmony toward a greater purpose. The archive's core erupted in brilliant light. Energy cascaded through the ancient machines, but instead of the destructive force Selena's people had intended, it flowed with unprecedented harmony. The very air seemed to shimmer as centuries of artificial programming began to dissolve. Warning, an ancient voice echoed through the chamber. Founding protocols entering reset phase. Initiating societal reconstruction. The technicians fled as waves of transformative energy swept through the archive. Thomas and Naira stood their ground, their combined influence guiding the change toward balance rather than chaos. What exactly are we doing? Naira asked, though her tone suggested she already knew. Giving your people back their free will. Thomas watched the energy patterns stabilize. The ability to choose who they want to be, how they want to interact, without artificial constraints. They won't thank us for it. Change is never easy. No, he agreed. But it's necessary. And you've already shown them it's possible. The transformation rippled outward from the archive, spreading through the crystal network that connected the entire palace, the city, the empire itself. As the light faded, they could feel the difference in the air, a lifting of invisible weights, a freedom from unseen chains. Naira turned to him, her otherworldly beauty enhanced by the glow of genuine emotion. You've changed everything. We've changed everything, he corrected. Together. And now? There was something new in her voice, not the command of a queen, but the question of an equal. Now you build something better. Not a society divided by gender, but one strengthened by diversity. He smiled slightly. Though you might want to start by pardoning all those males you exiled. Their perspectives could be valuable. Perhaps. Her lips curved in answer. Though I find myself particularly interested in one male's perspective. She stepped closer. You're still a mystery, Thomas. A human commander in a miner's body, who appeared exactly when my empire needed change. Maybe that's why I'm here. He met her gaze steadily. The universe has its own way of bringing the right people together at the right time. Around them, the archive hummed with renewed purpose, its ancient systems now dedicated not to division, but to understanding. Above, they could hear the sounds of confusion and discovery as palace inhabitants began to experience life without artificial constraints. It won't be easy, Naira mused. Changing centuries of beliefs, even if they were artificially imposed. No, Thomas agreed. But you won't be doing it alone. She looked at him sharply. You're staying? Well, he smiled, someone has to help you rebuild your advisory council. Besides, he gestured to his borrowed form, I seem to be stuck here anyway. Not stuck, she corrected, reaching for his hand again. Home. If you choose to be. As their fingers intertwined, the crystal matrix pulsed with approval, its light reflecting the promise of a future where differences weren't barriers to be overcome, but strengths to be celebrated. In the end, it wasn't about male or female, human or alien. It was about finding the courage to reach across divisions and create something greater than either could achieve alone. The ancient archive stood witness as Queen and Commander began planning their new future, its systems now dedicated not to enforcing separation, but to nurturing the infinite possibilities that arise when artificial barriers fall and hearts are free to choose their own path.